Hey folks, hope you're doing well. I think it's time for another little hack sesh here. We've had a lot of folks around the community lately that have expressed some interest in vSphere, VMware, and I wanted to cut a little video just walking through how you deploy Talos on vSphere. So let's take some time to do that today. We'll get a little bit in the weeds on some random stuff, and we'll wind up with a nice little VMware Talos cluster. So share my screen here. Um, First things first, I wanted to talk a little bit about just kind of building Talos. Like if I want to create a VMware image, right, an OVA, and we publish those with our releases, but it never hurts to know how to do this. So um, basically everything, all the images that we build are built basically with a container image called imager. Creative naming, I know. Um, but what that means is that, so I've got a commit in Talos Master that's not in a release yet. That adds a little bit of a quality of life for VMware, at least around how to bootstrap the node and what IP to hit and that kind of thing. So I'm gonna go build a Talos OVA to import into vSphere. So let's go do that. I'm in Talos, my Talos checkout, or my Talos fork rather. I'm gonna fetch the upstream, and then I'll reset to the absolute latest. I can see that that's some AWS stuff that Andre's been working on. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna build the imager container. So we have um, a crazy make file if you've never looked at our code base, but we have some really amazing things that happen in make and in build kit that you can make use of. But all I need to do is make imager, and that should take care of the rest. I'm going to override the registry to be Docker so that it just pushes to my Docker account, and push equals true as well, and overriding the username. So I'm going to push that, and then we will use it to make an OVA. And it shouldn't take too long to build. It hasn't been that long since I've built Talos, so hopefully we'll be pretty speedy here. And just to keep in mind too, like if you do want to build custom images, your own images of Talos for other things, like Imager is the way to do that. You can do it for AWS and GCP, and a few other ones I can't remember right off the top of my head, but there's a lot of options here, which is kind of cool. I should have told it to only build AMD 64. We're gonna cross compile, so it might be another second or two here. And once this is done, you'll see a little bit of output that points to that image name that gets pushed into Docker Hub. And that's the one we'll kind of pull back down and, like I said, use to build our image. So. And like I said, I know this is kind of an aside to actually building a VMware cluster, but I wanted to kind of get a little more in the weeds on some of this stuff in these videos, just to kind of show off some of the stuff that Talos does under the hood and the way we do things. Just because I think that's important context a lot of times, especially for folks that are interested in build kit and things like that. So. Um, while that's finishing up on the vSphere side, this is just in our lab environment. We've designated a few boxes to deploy VMware or deploy ESX and vSphere on. I'm still learning about this, so I'm not going to swear that this is the perfect setup. I've consumed VMware for a long time, here and there in different places I've worked, but I've never really spent a whole lot of time deploying it. So, um, you know, if folks have recommendations there, I mean, that's awesome. I would love to hear about them. And the nice thing is that we'll be hopefully introducing some of this into our CI pipelines. So we'll be testing vSphere or VMware deployments of Talos a lot more regularly. So that'll be nice. Okay, so imager's done. Cool. I'm going to rely on my batch history here to remind me how to build this thing. But basically, it's a Docker run command. I'm mounting up dev to dev, privileged, using this container. And then basically you pass in that I want to build an image. Platform is VMware, architecture is AMD64. And then basically tar it. And then we'll write the tar to the _out directory. So we'll run that. It'll pull that container back down, and then it will run the installer, and that should be pretty speedy. Cool. So now if I look in my _out directory of the Talos repo, I can see there's quite a few things since I built Talos CTL as part of Imager, I think. But the important bit is there's a VMware AMD64.ova. And so what I'm going to do is in a different terminal, I've got just kind of some of my stuff here for the vSphere demo here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy out, and that was VMware. I'm going to copy that in here so that I kind of have that handy as we want to push this stuff up. So we got a Talos image. That's awesome. It's now time to push it into vSphere. So what I've got here is I've got a script that will probably let's see. Hold on a second. I think I have this open already somewhere. Yeah, here we go. Okay. This is this vSphere folder here is kind of really all I'm worried about. But I've got a vSphere.shell file that I've written that'll probably make it into our docs in some form or fashion. I'm hoping mostly like this as I'm cutting this video, but it should be pretty close. But anyway, this will handle some of these basic things for getting these up and running. It'll upload the OVA by creating a new content library and importing that OVA. So that's one thing I'm pretty interested in right now. And then kind of just create and destroy clusters, right? Based on that OVA, it'll call like a library.deploy to create a VM out of that, and then change it based on the things that we give it. So we'll walk through that a little more as we go. But let's go ahead. I'm gonna word wrap that so it's a little easier to read. But let's go ahead and I'm going to. So I've got one other important thing before I get too far. You've got to set some environment variables here specific to vCenter or vSphere. I get the naming all confused. Sorry if I keep doing that. But the Go VC tool that we use is the Go binary for vCenter. It requires a bunch of stuff to kind of be set. So these are the ones that you're pretty much going to have to set. The others have default values as far as control planes and CPUs and memory and whatever. But you'll have to know these and set those in your environment. So I've got those locally here, so I'm just going to set them by sourcing that environment. I've got an environment file created. I just don't want to show it. But yeah, so I'll do that. I'm going to do a little more cleanup while I'm out here. Control plane, Talos, worker. Cool. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to do a vSphere shell. What is it? Delete OVA? Yeah. Just to make sure I don't have an existing content library out there. I think I might. But okay, cool. So now that I've got my OVA in this directory, which is great. And then I've got the ability to override the OVA path. So I'm going to say, I may already have it overridden. I was actually pointing to Talos, but I'm going to, you know what, we're going to leave that. So that's actually the path to the Talos _out directory, which is perfect. I actually don't need that in the current directory. So I'm going to remove it just to clean things up a little bit. So now we can do a vSphere, OVA, upload OVA. And again, that's going to talk to vSphere. It's going to create a content library based on the cluster name. And then it will import that OVA into that content library. So perfect. It is done. I'm going to see what my cluster name is set as. Apparently nothing, which is fine because it'll be vSphere test. That will work. And then what we're going to do now, so we've uploaded the OVA, and then before we get started actually booting VMs, we want to create some machine configs for those VMs to use. So I've got a patch file here. Again, I'm going to work all this stuff into our docs as we go over the next few days, but just to kind of walk through everything. This patch file, if you've used Talos before, we have the ability to do config patches that just kind of override some of the default values as we generate the configs. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a VIP. We have built-in support for VIPs as long as it's just like an IP in the same subnet as the VMs themselves. So I kind of have one flat VM network set up here. And then, so yeah, basically I've picked an IP out of that network that I'm going to use as my VIP. And then the other part that's really cool is I'm going to override the extra manifests using one of our community members. Oliver is super awesome and wrote this Talos VM Tools D project. And so what it does is it's kind of like Open VM Tools, I think is what it's called, if I remember right, for VMware. So you know, like you would normally install on a Linux distro, that provides the info back to vSphere that says like, here's my IP and here's my DNS name and whatever, right? Oliver kind of took that and rewrote it so that it uses the actual Talos APIs and runs as a daemon set in Kubernetes. And populates that info back to vSphere. So super big thanks to him for making this pretty painless and showing off how awesome the Talos API is too. So anyway, there's that. And then, so that's the config patch we're going to do. And we can do that right in our gen config command. So again, I'm going to rely on my bash history a little bit here, but I'm going to call this vSphere test. I'm going to say talosctl gen config cluster name, and then cluster endpoint or control plane endpoint, which is my VIP. And then I'm going to say config patch control plane. And this is kind of an interesting little hack here, because we don't support just like passing a file directly. It's really just like inline patches. But because bash is a cray, you can do things like this, right? Where you use YQ to read in a file formatted as JSON and put that in line as a config patch, right? Which is super cool. And I'm going to issue this command, and that's going to output the things you're used to from the Talos side, the control plane YAML, worker YAML, and Talos config. But yeah, so this is kind of this little YQ thing I thought was pretty neat. Let me just paste that in, and you can see like it takes that file, formats it as JSON, and just kind of puts it straight in line, right? So that's pretty cool. It's kind of a good thing to have in your tool belt for when you're doing Talos stuff. Yeah, so something neat to use. We've got our configs now, and so I think we're ready to create a cluster. What we're going to do basically is I'm going to keep most of this stuff default. I don't know why my word wrap keeps disappearing, but I'm going to keep most of this stuff defaults. You know, 3 control plane nodes, couple of CPUs each, 4 gigs of RAM, 10 gig of disk, and then, you know, the config path being basically the local path to control plane.yaml. So that should work out perfectly for me, but that you can override that if you need to. And then kind of the same deal for work account. So what this is going to do is it's going to go base 64 encode those configs. And then it will do a library deploy with govc to take that OVA and create a VM out of it. And then it will change the VM with the necessary info before, and then here's the disk change. But it'll do those 2 things before powering it on. So that's pretty much it. It's not that crazy. It was really just a factor of figuring out all the govc commands. So now that we have that, which is perfect, we will do a vSphere.show and a create. And so again, what that's going to do is it's going to go out here, and if in vSphere, we should start seeing things pop up. So there's control plane 1. It's doing its thing, deploying. And what we'll have to do is once these have been deployed, we'll need to bootstrap the cluster by picking one of the control plane nodes and issuing a Talos CTL bootstrap, just to say like, this is the first one, this is where I want you to init etcd and things like that, right? So this one is powered on, it's control plane 1, so if it's already there, I'm just going to use it. And what's going to happen is my quality of life improvement is this little guy right here, my mouse disappears, but kind of right here in the Talos CTL bootstrap output, if you see that, where I've added the ability to print out the IPs that it finds, and saying like, hey, you should run Talos CTL bootstrap, and also here's one of the IPs to run it against, because I quickly ran into a scenario where it was telling me I needed bootstrap, but I had no idea what the IP was, because I don't actually have access to the DHCP server here either, because this is not my lab network. This is one of our other guys that controls most of the stuff here. So so we output that IP now, which makes things a little easier. We're still deploying. We got another worker left, it looks like, and then we'll be able to launch that bootstrap command. And so, you know, if you've deployed Talos before, you probably already know this, but if nobody's bootstrapped it, it's going to just kind of sit there and hang. All the nodes will pretty much just kind of chill until things are ready to actually create a cluster out of them, which is pretty nice. So there's not a whole lot to worry about as far as like rushing to get this done. But, you know, it's kind of nice that it just does that. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to export Talos config to be the local Talos config in this directory that was created as part of my gen config command. And so I'm going to take that Talos config and I'm then going to do a Talos CTL config endpoint to change it from localhost to 172.16.199.239. Needs to be a 7, not a 9. And then when I do that, I should then be able to do Talos CTL bootstrap and give it -n for node. So endpoints and nodes are a little different. Endpoint is where you actually go to hit with the Talos CTL command, and then -n or node is what is the node that you want the command to actually be run against. So in a bigger deployment of Talos, you can go through your endpoint and hit all the nodes in the environment, which is pretty cool. So anyway, Talos CTL bootstrap -n, and you'll see kind of right away it starts doing some stuff. It starts up etcd. It starts deploying static pods and things like that. So this should be a pretty quick process. I've seen it be really fast in VMware actually. So I'll do a Talos CTL kubeconfig, and that will pull down my kubeconfig file from this new cluster, and then I can then do kubectl get nodes. And so no resources found yet, but the API server is up, and actually there we go. We're already up and running, starting to add nodes into the environment, which is pretty awesome. So that's cool. We're gonna wait a second on this and let this kind of settle for a second, because then I want to talk a little bit about the daemon set for VM tools. So we'll let this come up and start getting all the pods kind of created and scheduled. One thing to kind of note is that, like I said, a lot of our VMware stuff is a little in flux right now, and that like we're actively trying to make it better, and we're actively trying to put together some really nice reference architectures for things like this. Not only VMware, but other clouds and bare metal as well, just to make it really easy for people to pick up and get off to the races. But the stuff is a little in flux, so I'm sure there's some limitations that I'm probably not going to hit in this video. But if you do hit them, let us know. And the more that those things are communicated back up, the quicker we can handle them and make this better and easier for everyone. So it's greatly appreciated. Okay, so all nodes are up. Let's see about pods. So most of the pods are running except for the VM tools pods. And that's because things are a little bit in flux. Oliver's repo is actually undergoing a little bit of an update as well. And so the daemon set, so we've got to do a little work. Well, actually, so we've got to do a little work first. The way you deploy this is, so I deployed the daemon set as part of, the cluster creation. But what I also need to do is give it some API credentials to use to talk to the Talos nodes, talk to the APIs, figure out like interfaces and things like that, and communicate this back to vSphere. So Oliver is awesome and gave us exactly the command we need. So I'm going to copy kind of part of it, and I'm going to say against that same node. Again, this needs to be a control plane node because that's the only place you can create a new Talos config with the new roles and things. So I'm going to create a new one, VM tools D secret, and then what I can do is take that and immediately apply it to my cluster. And so that's now created a secret in the kube system namespace here, and that should cause all of these guys to go running, but they're not actually going to work straight away because, again, things are in flux, and Oliver is actually hacking right now on some big changes to this project that change the way that he talks to the APIs and finds the interfaces and things like that. So I'm actually going to do a kubectl get ds in the kube system namespace, and I'm going to edit the daemon set. And I'm going to tweak the image version. So this is the latest unstable. That's not quite what we want. We actually want develop 0.3, I believe. Let me go check. We have a nice little thread that has that info. So Oliver was talking in the, actually, it's good to know for folks. We have a Project Talos VMware channel in our community channel if you need VMware specific help. There's a lot of folks that have been doing this for a while and have even better, way better VMware experience than I do. So hit that up if you guys need help with anything. But yeah, we want develop-0.3. And then I will save that bad boy. And that should start a rolling. That should roll that out pretty quickly. And I'm going to go ahead and peek the logs here, but there's probably not going to be, from what I recall, there's basically not any logs if things are just working. So yeah, so it's like, hey, it's Apache license, cool. And then if I head back out to vSphere here, I can see that all of this cool stuff has happened, which means I can see the address, I can see the VIP, that's the one that's got the VIP right now. I can see it's DHCP address, its DNS name, all that good stuff. And so that's, it. That is deploying an HA control plane, or a full HA cluster rather, on vSphere with Talos. It's super easy. It's getting easier all the time. And I'll put up this script for folks who want it. I'm gonna work this into our docs, into our vSphere docs, so that folks can just pick this up and roll. Because like I said, it has it just has an upload OVA command, a create command, a destroy, and a delete for the OVA. So, and that's pretty much it. So now I want to kind of clean up after myself here. So again, I will just run a vSphere shell destroy. That's going to go through and drop all of those VMs super fast, actually. And then delete OVA is going to actually drop that content library and completely clean up as a part of that, clean up that OVA that we uploaded, and just kind of get rid of it. So cool. That's pretty much it. I hope this is super useful for people. I hope that if you're using VMware, you get a chance to try this out. And if you have issues, please let me know. I am more than happy to help you figure out why and try to make things a little easier on everyone. So I appreciate your time. Have a good one.